So, Jake this morning has a story that challenges us and some great theology that offers us comfort.
Good morning. In life, we all go through many changes and transitions, and the Bible talks a lot about change and transition. I personally have been through many major changes in my life, and I'm here today to talk about the biggest and most current change in my life, the transition from high school to adulthood. You see, growing up, my life was constantly changing, and not in the ways that you would expect. I wasn't growing older, I definitely was not growing taller, and I was going through so much more than that. I believe that there is a time for everything, and I believe that throughout my life, throughout all the changes I have been through, each had a destined time to take place. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, it says, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." For a long time in my life, I resented God, and this is why. Between the ages of 2 and 6, I moved into 3 different houses. Growing up with my mother was never easy. We didn't have much money, and there were often times when I went to bed on an empty stomach. Also, when I was 6, I moved into my grandparents' house because my mother had died. I'll never forget that day. I was in 1st grade, and I got signed out of school by my grandmother, and I can remember thinking, why am I leaving school? Did something happen? In my small 6-year-old brain, I could never have fathomed what my grandmother was about to sit me down and tell me. She sat me down on a cool metal bench outside of my school, took my hands in hers, and told me that my mother had died that morning. I began to cry, and throughout tears and sobs, I asked my grandmother, why did God take my mommy away? Growing up with my grandparents, it was a blast, and they truly gave me the best childhood and support system a child could ask for. We went to church every Sunday and Christian camp every summer. We went on trips to Disney World and to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and I can remember for every October, for at least 4 days, my grandmother would go out of town to visit old friends in Kentucky that she had grown up with. And also, my grandfather and I would order our Chinese takeout, get in our PJs, and watch old monster movie marathons on TV until the early hours of the morning. He'd even let me sleep in my grandmother's bed, which to an 8-year-old was the best. He was my best friend, and I truly had an amazing childhood thanks to my grandparents. That was until an unexpected change occurred. When I was 10, my grandfather was diagnosed with multiple myeloma cancer, and it was terminal. Soon my whole world changed. Days playing golf on a roof and cleaning up old fossils were soon gone. No more Chinese takeout and monster movie marathons, no more vacations. We had to move houses, neighborhoods, schools, everything. Quickly my life turned into hospitals, tears, and eventually shrouded by death yet again. For when I was 12, cancer stole my grandfather away from me. But I believed that it was God who had taken him from me. I lost my faith after my grandfather died, and I lost my faith in God. I can remember asking my Aunt Emily, why did God take my grandpa away? Why did he let him go through so much pain? She didn't have those answers, and so I quit coming to church and church camp, and I became very lost as an individual. Without my faith, I had no rules, no emotional support, and I was simply lost. And then, even more changes took place, ones that would impact my life forever in many drastic ways. You see, during the adolescence and middle school years, teenagers begin to develop their true personality, and I was to find that mine was not simply what it had seemed to be. Growing up, I was a stereotypical girl. I loved the color pink, I loved dresses and Barbie dolls, but in middle school, everything began to change. I had this sudden urge to just cut off all my hair. I don't know why, I just knew I had to. And then I didn't feel like wearing makeup anymore, like my big sister. Then that progressed to me not liking girls' clothing, and then even further, to me believing I wasn't even a girl. In high school, I made a lot of mistakes trying to find out who it was exactly that I was. I fell in love a few times, I lost track of my schoolwork, and myself. It seemed that whilst trying to figure out who I really was, I lost myself. So, I went back to therapy. And while in therapy, I had this sudden epiphany. And I said to the therapist, I'm a boy. And it clicked. My brain and my body were not matching up, but it all made sense all of a sudden. I'm often asked by people that God created us in His image, and why would I change my image if it was perfect in the eyes of God? Well, I see it as this. God created my soul, and my parents created my body. And my soul and my body simply did not match up, but my soul was in God's image. But more changes were happening all around me, as if that weren't enough already. When you come out to the world as being transgender, there's a lot of backlash, and there's a lot of horrible things that happen to you, such as bullying, isolation, and just people not understanding in general. So throughout high school, I went to 3 different high schools trying to escape this backlash. But these horrible things are not just things that happen to me, but for every single LGBT person out there. 72% of trans people have been, assaulted. 61% of those people have committed suicide. I finally found my home at Butler Tech School of the Arts. But until I had found that home, I had to deal with so much more pain before I was to find where I belonged. One of the many things I had to deal with was the bullying and harassment. I can remember being called names, being shoved inside of lockers, downstairs, being harassed daily, teachers letting it happen, and school guidance counselors turning a blind eye. All because they didn't understand and they couldn't adapt to change. After all the pain I had experienced in my life, I can remember constantly asking, why me? Why did God let this happen to me? But you'd think after 12 years of school, 18 years of life, and all those changes that I'd be pretty much done with change. But no. I decided I wanted to go to college and to make something of my life. And most of all, I wanted to make my mother and my grandmother proud. Graduating high school and going to college means starting over for me, a fresh new beginning and a chance to start anew. In the fall, I will be attending Bluffton University, and I'll be majoring in art therapy and Bible and theology, and eventually moving on to get my master's degree in Christian counseling. Now, you probably have a couple questions. One of them is probably being, what about my faith? And 2, what is art therapy? And why art therapy? Well, both of these questions can be answered by one scenario. When I was 16, I was admitted to Cincinnati Children's mental health ward for attempted suicide. Remember how I told you that I had lost my faith after my grandfather died? Well, not only did I lose myself after coming out as being transgender, I began to hate myself. The words people threw at me, the things people did to me. It took a toll on me, and it became what I told myself every day. So I decided that I wanted it all to stop, and I ended up in the hospital. Whilst in the hospital, those questions of why me and why my family came up again. I felt like I was at the end of my road, but one day, during one of the group therapy sessions, an art therapist came in to work with the patients. Now, most of you know that I've been into art my entire life. I've never stopped putting a pencil down. Well, when I heard of art therapy, I was immediately drawn to it and wanted to try it myself. The art therapist handed us these wooden plaques and some paint, and he told us to paint a quote to hang on my wall and to lift us up when we were down. And so after a few minutes of pondering, I began to paint the words, "Don't dream it, be it," from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I painted my heart out on that little wood plaque, and I look at it every day. I even have those same words tattooed on the back of my right arm. After I painted, I felt such a sense of relief, and I felt euphoric, and I finally felt at peace. But on that same day, during art therapy, after I painted my plaque, my grandmother came to visit me. And the visit went fine, but at the end of that visit, Grandma wanted to pray for me, and I said no. When asked why, I simply said, "I don't believe God can help me anymore." Again, Grandma asked me why, and I told her it was because of all he had let happen to me in life. All the death and all the pain, and that is when she said something that totally changed my entire life. God does not let stuff happen. God did not take your mother away or grandpa away. God gave us free will, and he gave your mother free will, and she made the wrong choices. God does not let bad things happen. He lets life happen. I spent my whole life blaming God for all of my issues, and I spent my whole life blaming him and resenting him. It was only a year ago that I began to realize that God had never abandoned me, and he had never caused these things to happen. Life let those things happen to me, and God has been there all along, sticking by my side through thick and thin, in so many ways. Through my church, I have a scrapbook my grandmother had made me when I was 6, of all the cards members of the church had sent me when my mother had died. I have a blanket that Zola had made me when I was a baby. He was there through every death, every change, every therapy session. And now every night I pray. I pray for new changes to go well, and I thank God for all he has done. And I know that with him by my side, I will be okay. Psalm chapter 16, verses 7 through 11 sums this up perfectly. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord, and with him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful one see decay. You make known to me the path of life, and you fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. I'd like to take a moment and thank the church and all of you for always being here for me in every way imaginable, throughout every surgery, every change, and your support, and throughout all my life has meant the world to me. I would also like to thank 3 special church members who impacted my life heavenly. Sharon, for always her kind words and for sticking up for me when times got rough. And Janice, not just for being my friend, but for your never-ending support and for being my best friend. And finally, to Pastor Tracy. You have inspired and comforted me in so many ways, through your sermons to your guidance in my career choices. And I'd like to thank you all for that. Now, college, this is a big step, but I'm not afraid. Grandma, I know you're worried about me. I know that you're so worried about me, but I'll be okay, all thanks to you and Grandpa and a couple of the guys upstairs. Because God has guided me throughout this entire process, and he hasn't left my side once throughout my life, even when I thought he had. He has had my back since day one, and I know he'll give me strength and guidance with this big change. I am proud of the life I have created for myself, and I don't regret a single change that I have been through, because I believe that God let me face those changes to make me stronger, and that is exactly how I came out of high school, stronger. So I leave you with this, an excerpt from Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope